Just when Elena finally stopped running, one photo dragged Lucian's dead father back from the grave. After Victor was sentenced, Kovalenko was arrested, and Elena began building a new life with Lucian. The city finally looked like a place to begin. Then, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One grainy photo. A woman beside a black car in Vancouver. Lucian's mother. On the back was a message that changed everything. Tell my son, his father is still alive. And this time, Elena was not waiting to be rescued. Blood on white marble does not look like blood at first. Not under city lights. Not when the room is too quiet, and the windows are high enough to make the world below look harmless. It looks dark, almost black, like spilled wine, like a secret trying to dry before morning. Elena Vale learned that on the night, Lucien Armand came home with one sleeve torn, one hand bandaged, and an expression so calm it frightened her more than the cut across his ribs. The marble floor, near the private elevator, was cold beneath her bare feet. She remembered that detail later. Not the sirens far below. Not the rain pushing silver lines down the glass. Not even the way Lucian's blood dropped once, then twice, before he pressed his palm against his side and told her not to panic. She remembered the cold floor, because fear often chooses small places to live. He stood in front of her, still wearing his black coat, still smelling of rain, smoke, and the metallic edge of violence. For weeks, she had wondered what it would take to make a man like him bleed. Now she knew. He had bled because of her. Or maybe because he had lied to her. Maybe both. Elena, he said, his voice low, steady, too steady. Look at me. She did not. She looked at the blood instead. 3 weeks earlier, she would have thought blood meant the end of the story. Now she understood. Blood was often where the truth began. Did you know? She asked. Lucien did not answer fast enough. That was answer enough. Her throat tightened. The city shimmered behind him. All gold windows and moving headlights. As if millions of ordinary lives were continuing without one person inside them. Having to learn that the man who saved her might also have arranged the moment she needed saving. Before the club, she said. Before I grabbed your arm. Before I said I had been looking for you. Did you already know who I was? Lucien closed his eyes for 1 second. Just one, but Elena saw the confession in it. Yes, the word did not echo. It sank. It went straight through her. She stepped back. Not because she was afraid he would hit her. That would have been easier to understand. She stepped back because something delicate inside her, something she had been building, with shaking hands, cracked cleanly down the middle. Trust did not always break loudly. Sometimes it broke in one word. Yes, but this was not where the story began. It began with music. Loud music. A bass line that shook the walls of a nightclub called St. Vale, where beautiful strangers moved under blue lights as if danger had never learned their names. Elena had not wanted to go that night. Mara had insisted. Mara always insisted when Elena disappeared too far into herself. One drink, she had said, standing in Elena's doorway with lipstick in one hand and stubborn love in her eyes. One night where you are not a ghost in your own life. Elena had almost refused. She had refused so many things since leaving Victor Hale. Dinner invitations, gallery openings, calls from old friends who did not understand why she never answered unknown numbers. She had changed her apartment, changed her phone, changed the route she walked to work, changed the way she slept. Shoes near the bed, bag by the door, curtains closed before sunset, keys between her fingers in parking lots. It was amazing how much of a life could become strategy. Still, Mara looked at her with such fierce hope that Elena said yes. So she wore a black dress from before Victor. She let Mara curl her brown hair. She put on earrings her mother had given her. She stood in front of the mirror and tried not to see every place fear had carved itself into her posture. At St. Vale, the air smelled of perfume, alcohol, and heat. Mara pulled her through the crowd and shouted something about dancing, but Elena only smiled and held her water. The old habits came back. Count the exits. Watch the men who watch too long. Never stand with your back to a hallway. Keep your phone charged. Her phone was not charged. Of course it was not. She looked down at the black screen and felt irritation flash into panic. Nothing worked when she needed it. Then she saw Victor. He stood near the VIP stairs, broad-shouldered, well-dressed, clean-shaven. The picture of a man who could convince strangers he was reasonable. That was part of his cruelty. Victor never looked like a monster in public. He looked like a wounded boyfriend, a good man pushed too far, a man who could say, "I am just worried about her," and make people nod. His eyes found hers across the crowd. He smiled, not with surprise, with satisfaction. Elena turned and ran. She did not run toward Mara. She would not lead him to the one person who had kept her breathing after she left. She did not run to the front door. Too crowded. Too obvious. Victor knew how she thought, because he had trained her to think around him. She pushed through a velvet rope into a private corridor. A security guard turned too late. Her heels struck the floor. The music dimmed behind her, replaced by the sound of her own breath. She reached a quieter hallway lined with dark mirrors and closed doors. Then a hand clamped around her wrist. Hard, familiar. "There you are, baby," Victor said. His voice was soft. It always started soft. "Do you have any idea how worried I have been?" Pain shot up her arm. Elena looked at the nearest guard, but he faced the crowd. People were always facing the wrong way when a woman needed help. "Let go," she said. She was proud that her voice held. Victor stepped closer. "We need to talk." No, his fingers tightened. "You do not get to vanish and tell me no." There he was. The real Victor under the practiced concern. The man who had once cried outside her door, and then punched the wall beside her head when she opened it. The man who said she made him angry because she knew how to push his buttons. The man who apologized with flowers and punishment in the same week. Elena opened her mouth to scream. Then she saw Lucian. He stood near a private booth, half in shadow, dressed in a black suit that fit like a warning. He was not drinking. He was not laughing. He was watching Victor's hand around her wrist. Not her face. Not her body. The hand, that should not have mattered. But it did. Most people looked at the scene and saw drama. Lucian looked and saw a grip. Spreciation makes people brave in ways they cannot afford. Elena twisted free with everything she had and stumbled toward him. She caught his arm with both hands. "There you are," she said, breathless. "I have been looking everywhere for you." For one long second, he looked down at her. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver in the club lights, cold enough to cut through panic. He could have pushed her away. He could have said he did not know her. He could have laughed at the obvious lie. Instead, his hand settled at the small of her back. Firm, natural, protective without trapping. "Forgive me," he said smoothly. "I lost track of time." Victor appeared behind her, face flushed, smile gone. "Elena, we are not done." Lucian looked at him. "I think you are." The words were quiet. The air changed anyway. Victor straightened, trying to look larger. "This is between me and my girlfriend." "Your girlfriend?" Lucian asked. He sounded almost curious. "Is that what she is?" Victor looked at Elena, and the warning in his eyes pulled her backward through 2 years of obedience. "Tell him, fix this. Do not embarrass me." Elena swallowed. Lucian's hand remained steady. "I am not his girlfriend," she said. "Not anymore." Victor's face darkened. "You little careful," Lucian said. One word, not loud, not dramatic, but Victor stopped. Lucian stepped closer to him and said something Elena could not hear. Whatever it was. Victor went pale. For the first time since she had known him, he looked afraid. Not angry, not wounded, afraid. He backed away. "This is not over," he said. But the words had lost their teeth. "I will find you." Lucian smiled. "No, you will not." Victor disappeared into the crowd. Elena's knees almost failed. Lucian caught her elbow before she fell and guided her through the curtain into the private booth. Inside, the noise became a distant throb. Leather seats, low light, a glass table without fingerprints. "Sit," he said. "Before your body remembers, it is terrified." She sat. Her hands shook so badly, she folded them in her lap. "Thank you," she whispered. "I am sorry. I should not have. Do not apologize for surviving." The sentence stopped her. Not because it was beautiful. Because it was precise. He handed her a bottle of water from somewhere inside the booth. "Drink." She drank because she had no energy left to argue. "What did you say to him?" Lucian sat across from her. "The truth. Which is that, if he came near you again, he would disappear so completely even his shadow would deny knowing him." Elena stared. "You do not even know me. I knew enough. That does not answer anything. It answers the only thing that mattered in that hallway." She looked away. Her wrist throbbed. "My name is Elena. Elena Vale," he said. Then he stopped himself. Too late, at the time. Fear made her miss it. Later she would remember. "Elena," he corrected. "I am Lucian." "Lucian what?" "Just Lucian tonight." That should have scared her. It did, but not the way Victor scared her. Victor was heat, rage, a room with no air. Lucian was cold, controlled, a locked weapon. "How long has he been looking for you?" Lucian asked. 3 months. "How long were you with him?" 2 years. Restraining order. Her laugh came out broken. "Yes, did it work?" She looked at him. "Would I be hiding in a private booth with a stranger if it worked?" Lucian nodded, as if she had confirmed something he already knew. A piece of paper can define a boundary. It cannot create consequences in a man who thinks rules are for other people. So what am I supposed to do? You can keep running, he said. New number, new apartment, new job, new city if you can afford it. Hope he gets bored before he gets lucky. And the other option. Lucian reached into his jacket and placed a black card on the table. No name, no company. Only a silver number. When you are tired of hoping, call me. She should have left the card there. She should have found Mara, gone straight to the police, done all the correct things strangers advise from safe rooms. Instead, she took it. Lucian stood. Do not go home tonight. How do you know I was going to? Because people being hunted return to familiar places when the fear fades. He paused at the curtain. Stay with a friend. Somewhere he does not know. And if he knows all my friends, then call me sooner. He left her with that. Mara found her minutes later, frantic and apologizing, pulling her out of the club and into the cold night. Elena told her only enough. Victor had found her. A stranger had helped. She needed to sleep on Mara's couch. Mara did not ask too many questions that night. Good friends know when questions are another weight. But as Elena lay awake under a borrowed blanket, the black card on the coffee table within reach, she kept hearing Lucian's voice. When you are tired of hoping. She did not know then that Lucian had been investigating Victor for 2 weeks before St. Vale. She did not know Victor had not found her by accident. She did not know the stranger she grabbed had already known her name, her job, her address, and the color of the scarf she wore to work on Tuesdays. She only knew that Victor had been afraid, and for one fragile night, that felt like safety. For 4 days, Elena did not call. She told herself that was strength. It was not. It was terror wearing a cleaner shirt. She went to work at the small gallery, where she managed the front desk, client appointments, and the egos of men who asked whether paintings had investment potential before they asked who painted them. She smiled. She processed invoices. She spoke softly to people who interrupted her. She ate lunch at her desk because sitting in the park made her feel too visible. Each evening she went back to Mara's apartment, folded herself onto the couch, and pretended not to notice how fear had started charging rent there too. Mara's boyfriend stopped coming over. Mara checked the peephole before opening the door. Mara lowered her voice when speaking in the hallway. Abuse is greedy. It does not stop with the person it hunts. It spreads to every person who offers shelter. You can stay as long as you need. Mara said on the 3rd night. Elena believed her. That made it worse. On the 4th afternoon, Elena went back to her own apartment while the sun was still high. Daylight felt safer. That was the lie she chose because she needed clothes, documents, and the charcoal sketch her mother had made before she died. She promised herself 15 minutes, in and out. Her apartment looked exactly as she had left it. Small, sparse, pale walls, no photographs, no sentimental clutter. Everything chosen because it could be abandoned quickly. She filled a suitcase and tried not to think about how the rooms felt less like home than a waiting area for disaster. Then she saw the photo on the kitchen table. Elena stopped breathing. It showed her outside the gallery 2 days earlier, wearing a cream sweater and carrying coffee. The angle was from across the street. On the back, in Victor's handwriting, were 6 words. I only want to talk. He had been inside, or someone had. The locks meant nothing. The daylight meant nothing. Elena backed away from the table, grabbed the suitcase, and ran. At the corner, before she could think herself out of it, she pulled the black card from her wallet. Her thumb hovered over the number. Then a text arrived from an unknown number. A photo of Mara's apartment building. Under it, you should not involve your friends. Elena's knees weakened. She dialed Lucian. He answered on the 2nd ring. Elena, not hello. Not who is this. Her name. Calm, certain he found Mara's place, she said. He was inside my apartment. Where are you? 6th and Palmer. Stay in public. Do not go underground. Do not enter any building he could control. My driver will reach you in 3 minutes. Your driver. 3 minutes. He hung up. The black car arrived in 4. Sleek, tinted, too expensive for the block. A man in a dark suit opened the door. Miss Vale. Elena looked around, half expecting Victor to step from behind a parked car. Yes, mister. Armand asked me to bring you to a secure location. Armand, so Lucian had a last name. She got in because fear had burned through pride. The car did not take her to a police station. It took her to a glass tower in the financial district, where the lobby smelled of stone, flowers, and money. They rode a private elevator to the top floor. Lucian waited in an office that overlooked the city, like a command center. In daylight, he looked less like a nightclub stranger, and more like what he was. Power with a pulse. Black suit, white shirt, no tie, sleeves buttoned. Watch old and simple. Eyes that did not waste movement. He took Elena's phone and read the messages. His face did not change. He is escalating faster than expected. Expected, yes. You expected him to stalk me. I expected him to make contact. Not to enter your apartment this quickly. Not to threaten Mara directly. She sat because her legs felt unreliable. Why would he be this bold? Because either he is losing control, or someone is helping him. Elena's eyes stared at him. Helping him do what? Reach you. Why, that is what we need to find out. We. Lucian looked at her. Yes, we. She shook her head. No, you do not get to say we like I understand what this is. I called because I was scared. That does not mean I belong to you. Something like approval moved through his eyes. Good. Good. Good that you can still say that. Fear makes people surrender too much, too quickly. He moved to the window. I run a private security firm. Officially, we protect executives, diplomats, collectors, and families with more money than judgment. Unofficially, we handle problems that the legal system often recognizes too late. That sounds illegal. Sometimes it is uncomfortable. Sometimes it is both. And Victor is a man who has learned that if he smiles in public, people mistake control for concern. He will not respond to shame. He will not respond to blocked numbers. He may respond to evidence, pressure, and fear. You keep talking about fear, because fear is a tool. Not the best tool, not the first tool. But sometimes the only language a violent man respects is the one he taught everyone else. Elena stood. I do not want another man controlling my life. Then do not let me. He turned back to her. I am going to offer you something. You are free to refuse. What? A job? She blinked. A job. Lucian opened a file on his desk and turned it toward her. Photographs of paintings, sculptures, rare books, antique jewelry, and museum-quality pieces she recognized from catalogs but had never expected to see in one private collection. You studied art history and restoration. You manage a gallery below your skill level. You identified a forged signature last year, and your employer sold the work anyway. Because the buyer did not ask enough questions. Elena's stomach tightened. How do you know that? I looked, without permission. Yes, that should make me leave. It should make you question me. It should not make you walk back into danger, just to prove a point. She hated that he was right. She hated more that he did not pretend to be harmless. I need a curator, he said. Someone with taste, discipline, and enough moral discomfort to ask whether something should be owned. Just because it can be bought. You want to hire me? Yes, and in exchange, a real salary. Housing while your security risk is active. Legal support if you pursue charges. Documentation of every threat. Security for you and Mara. And my protection. What does your protection mean? It means no one touches you without consequences. That sounds like ownership. It is responsibility. Those can look the same from the inside. The sentence stopped him. He closed the file slowly. Then we define the terms. In writing, you keep your own bank account, your own phone, your own access to Mara. You may leave whenever you choose. If you want police involvement, my legal team supports it. If you want distance from me, Diane Reeves handles your security instead. Who is Diane? My head of operations. She will terrify you less than I do, but only because she smiles more, despite everything. Elena almost smiled. And if I say no, my driver takes you wherever you want. I still send evidence to your lawyer. I still increase visible security around Mara S. building for 48 hours because Victor threatened her to reach you. Then you decide what comes next. She looked at the file again. The job was real. The danger was real. Lucian was real in a way that made all polite reassurances feel thin. What do you get? Your expertise, your discretion, and the satisfaction of teaching a bully that the world has teeth. That weekend, Mara hated the offer. She sat cross-legged on her couch, holding tea she forgot to drink, while Elena told her a careful version of the truth. A security firm, Mara said. That is what he calls it. That is what it is. Mostly, Elena did not answer. Mara rubbed her forehead. Elena, that is where people in movies get buried. This is not a movie. Exactly, in real life. Dangerous men do not become safe because they have better suits. I know, do you? Because this sounds like trading one dangerous man for another. Elena looked at the loaned phone Lucian had given her. Sleek, silent, heavy with possibility. Victor wanted me small. Lucian wants me informed. That is not the same as safe. No, Elena said. But it is different. Mara softened. Promise me something. What? Do not let gratitude become love. Someone saves you, and your nervous system can mistake relief for destiny. Elena looked down. It was the most useful thing anyone had said to her all week. I promise, I will remember that. Sunday afternoon, Victor sent another message. A photo of Elena entering Lucien S. building. He is using you. She forwarded it to Lucien, then to Diane, whom she had not met yet. Diane called within 2 minutes. Her voice was calm, older, British around the edges. Miss Vale, listen carefully. Do not leave Mara's apartment alone. A car will collect you tomorrow at 8. We believe Mr. Hale has access to professional surveillance resources. Who would give him that? Someone with an interest in Mr. Armand's vulnerabilities. I am a vulnerability. Diane paused. At the moment, you are being treated as one by people who do not know you. That can be corrected. Elena accepted the job Monday morning. Not because she trusted Lucien fully. She did not. Not because she was in love. She was not. She accepted because she was tired of running from a man who confused possession with devotion. She accepted because work gave her a reason to stand somewhere other than behind a locked door. And she accepted because Lucien had done something Victor never had. He had offered terms, boundaries, a choice. The penthouse felt like a beautiful trap until Lucien showed her the lock on the inside of the guest suite. No one enters without permission, he said. Not Margaret. Not Diane. Not me. Elena looked at him. You say that like you know why it matters. His expression changed slightly. I do, because of your mother. The question escaped before she could stop it. Lucien's eyes became distant. Who told you about my mother? No one. You recognized my fear too easily. For a moment, the mask slipped. Behind it, Elena saw grief so old it had turned into architecture. My father was admired by everyone, except the woman who knew him best, Lucien said. When she finally ran, no one helped, because helping her meant challenging him. I was 16. I had no power. And now I do. He stepped back. Sleep, Elena. You are safe here. Safe. The word should have felt warm. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a dark pool. The first week was not romance. That mattered. Later, people would want to make the story simple. Dangerous man saves wounded woman. Wounded woman heals him. That was not what happened. Healing was not soft music and perfect hands. Sometimes healing was Diane Reeves sitting across from Elena at 9 in the morning, saying, You are not paranoid. You are observant, because your life taught you observation as survival. We are going to keep the skill and remove the panic. Elena wrote the sentence down. Diane continued. Fear is a signal, not a command. When you learn the difference, fear stops being your jailer and becomes information. Sarah, a compact security specialist with calm hands, taught Elena how to break a wrist hold. The first time Sarah grabbed her, Elena froze. Shame flooded her. Sarah released immediately. Good, Sarah said. Now we know where the first lock is. That was not good. It was honest. Training starts where the body is, not where pride wants it to be. They practiced again. Step. Turn, drop weight, move toward the thumb, make noise, do not apologize. Again, 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 on the 20th attempt. Elena broke free without thinking. She cried after, not because she was sad, because her body had learned one new ending to old story. Lucien gave her real work. His art collection was not decorative. It was vast, uneven, morally complicated, and fascinating. Elena catalogued paintings, flagged suspicious provenance, questioned acquisitions, that had been praised by people with better titles and less conscience. On her third day, she found a problem with a Renaissance bronze. The surface was altered to hide damage. She told Lucien in his study. Someone sold you a restored piece as untouched. Lucien leaned over the file. Can you prove it? Yes. Give me 2 days. Take 1, that is not how research works. Then take 2. Was that a negotiation? A successful one. Slowly, a rhythm formed. Breakfast across the table. Work in separate offices. Calls in languages Elena did not understand. Dinner with careful conversation. Lucien asked about art, books, her mother. He did not ask about Victor unless she offered. When she did, he listened without interrupting, which was harder than comfort and more useful. One night, after she told him how Victor first convinced her that her friends disrespected their relationship, Lucien said, that was not jealousy. That was isolation. Elena looked into her tea. I know that now. Knowing after does not make you foolish before. People act like red flags are obvious. They are obvious from a safe distance. Up close, they often look like love needing reassurance. That was the first time she cried in front of him. Lucien did not touch her until she nodded. Then he handed her a napkin and sat beside her. Close enough to steady, not close enough to trap. That mattered more than flowers, more than money. Respect was not a speech. It was space given when someone could have taken more. there were softer moments too. Quiet ones. The kind Elena did not trust at first, because soft things had often been used against her. One morning, she came into the kitchen and found Lucian reading the instructions on a box of chamomile tea, as if it were a legal contract. Margaret stood nearby, lips pressed together, clearly trying not to laugh. "What are you doing?" Elena asked. Lucian did not look up. "Learning the correct steeping time. It is tea. You said yesterday that everyone oversteeps it. I was complaining to myself. I heard you. The tea was still a little too strong." He looked annoyed with himself. Elena drank all of it anyway. Another night. After training left her shoulders aching. She found a heating pad and a note outside her door. "Sarah says this helps," I asked before leaving it. That last sentence mattered most, I asked. He was learning. So was she. She learned not to flinch when James opened the car door. She learned to say no to a meeting time that made her feel rushed. She learned to tell Margaret she did not like lilies because Victor once bought them after a fight. And Margaret removed every lily from the penthouse by dinner. No questions, no pity, just action. Then Victor struck where Elena had no armor. "Mara," it began with a package. Elena's old scarf arrived at Mara's apartment with a note. "You always come back to what belongs to you," Mara called, furious and scared. "I want to kill him," she said, not helpful, but honest. Lucian wanted Mara moved to a secure hotel. Mara refused. "I am not letting your terrifying boss relocate me, like witness protection, because your ex is a psycho," she said. "I have a job. I have a cat. I have rent. And I do not trust men who solve problems with black cars." Elena could not argue with that, so Diane and Sarah went to Mara instead. They changed her locks, installed a camera, helped her document the package, taught her what to say if Victor appeared. "The goal is not to win a fight," Sarah told Mara. "The goal is to not be moved to a second location. If someone tries to take you somewhere, you become loud, heavy, and inconvenient." Mara looked at Elena. "This is insane." Elena nodded. "Yes, but useful. Also yes." That night, Mara hugged Elena at the door. "I still do not trust Lucian." "Good," Elena whispered. "Do not trust him for me. I need someone who sees what I might miss." 2 days later, Victor made himself public. Elena had gone to the Meridian Hotel to meet a dealer about a landscape Lucian wanted evaluated. James waited outside. Sarah was in the lobby. Diane had approved the route. Everything was careful. Everything was controlled. Victor still appeared beside the elevators. "Elena," he said softly. "Please, 5 minutes." Her pulse spiked. Then Diana's words came back. "Fear is a signal, not a command." Elena turned slightly so the lobby cameras had a clear view. "You are not allowed to contact me." Victor lifted both hands. "I am worried about you. That man has people following me. He has people following Mara. You do not see what he is doing." "I see what you are doing." "No, you do not. He is replacing me." Elena almost laughed from horror. "You think this is about 2 men competing for ownership?" His eyes flashed. "There he was. You were mine before he ever saw you." Sarah moved closer. James entered from the front doors. Victor changed tactics instantly. His voice rose. "Everyone, please. My girlfriend is being controlled by a dangerous man. She is not thinking clearly." Heads turned. People slowed. The old humiliation burned Elena's face. He had done this before. Made fear look like instability. Made control look like concern. Lucian entered the lobby. He had not been scheduled to be there. Diane had called him the second Victor appeared. He walked in without hurry. That was his gift. He made speed look unnecessary. "Mr. Hale," he said. Victor stiffened. You were notified through counsel that any direct approach would be documented as harassment." Lucian's voice carried clearly. "This hotel has cameras. My staff are witnesses. Elena has told you to leave. You will leave. You think you own her." Victor snapped. Lucian's eyes went cold. "No, that is the difference between us." The lobby quieted. Victor knew he was losing the room, so he used shame. "Ask her how long before she sleeps with you out of gratitude," he said. "Ask her if she knows the difference between love and needing a guard dog." The words hit because part of Elena had asked herself the same thing. Lucian took 1 step forward. His expression did not change, but the air did, for 1 terrible second. Elena thought he might put Victor through the marble wall, and Victor wanted that. She saw the phone half hidden in his hand, recording. Bait. Elena moved before Lucian could. She stepped between them, not close to Victor, but clearly enough for every camera. "My name is Elena Vale," she said. Her voice shook once, then steadied. "Victor Hale is my former partner. I left because he controlled me, isolated me, and hurt me. I have told him not to contact me. He has followed me, entered my apartment, threatened my friend, and approached me again after being warned. I am saying this clearly. I do not want contact with him. I do not belong to him. I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am not his. Silence. A woman near reception lowered her phone, tears in her eyes. Victor looked stunned. He had expected Lucian's violence. He had not expected Elena's voice. Lucien moved beside her, no longer in front. You heard her, he said. Victor left before police arrived, but as he passed through the revolving doors, he looked back once. His face had gone blank. Elena knew that blankness. It meant something inside him had moved past anger into decision. That evening, Lucien took her to a quiet restaurant instead of straight home. Not because food fixed fear, because bodies under stress forget they need simple things. Soup, water, warm bread, a table near a wall. Elena barely ate, but Lucien did not comment. He tore a piece of bread, placed it near her bowl, and spoke about a painting in Brussels he wanted her opinion on. Normal words, a normal tone, a normal moment offered without force. Are you distracting me? She asked. Yes, it is obvious. I am new to emotional subtlety. She almost laughed. That small almost was enough. Later, at the penthouse, he changed the bandage on her wrist, where Victor's grip had left faint bruising. He did it with the care of someone handling an old manuscript. You should not have had to speak in that lobby, he said. No, she said, but I am glad I did. So am I. You were going to hit him. Yes, you cannot do that for me. His hand stilled. I can do many things. Not if doing them makes me the excuse for you, becoming what people say you are. He wrapped the bandage cleanly. Then tell me when I get close. I did. He looked at her. Yes, you did. The name Marcus Kovalenko entered Elena's life, like a draft under a locked door. At first it was only a pause in Lucien's calls. A file turned face down when she entered. A phrase in Russian that made Diana's jaw tighten. Then came Marcus Chen. Not Kovalenko. Not yet. Marcus Chen was 32. Quiet, polite, and forgettable in the way good analysts often are. He worked 2 floors below Lucien's office. Elena had seen him twice in the elevator. He smiled without showing teeth. On a rainy Wednesday, Diane discovered someone had downloaded sections of Elena's security file, along with building access notes, route patterns, emergency contacts, and 3 high-value client protocols. The breach was small enough to hide from a careless company, and large enough to get someone killed. Diane found it in 6 hours. Lucien found Marcus in 7. They did not drag him into a basement. That was not Lucien's way. When the legal world was still useful, they brought him into a conference room after hours with counsel present, cameras on, and Diane sitting near the door like judgment in a tailored suit. Elena watched from behind one-way glass, because Lucien said she deserved to know what betrayal looked like when it did not wear a villainous face. Marcus sweated through his collar before anyone asked a question. Who paid you? Lucien asked. No one. Wrong answer. I made a mistake. Closer. Who paid you? Diane slid a folder across the table. Photos. Bank transfers. Coffee shop footage. A pale-eyed man handing Marcus an envelope. Kovalenko's people approached you 6 months ago. Diane said. They knew about your gambling debts. They cleared $38,000 through 2 shell payments. In exchange, you provided client intelligence. Marcus' face crumpled. It was not supposed to hurt anyone. Lucien leaned back. People say that when they prefer not to understand what information is for. They said it was market research. And when they asked for Elena Velas' roots, Marcus covered his face. I did not know they would give it to her ex. I swear, her ex. Not Victor. As if harm became smaller when names disappeared. Elena pressed her palm to the glass. She did not feel shocked. She felt clarified. Victor had not suddenly become smart. He had been given tools, money, information, a map back into her life. Lucien's voice dropped. Marcus Kovalenko used a violent man as a leash. You helped put that leash in his hand. Marcus began to cry. It did not move Lucien. It moved Elena, but not toward pity, toward understanding. Weakness could be dangerous even when it was not cruel. A person did not have to hate you to sell you. Sometimes they only had to need money, more than they cared about your safety. Marcus gave them names, dates, payment routes, and a private number, connected to Kovalenko's lieutenant. By midnight, they had enough to confirm Diana's suspicion. Kovalenko, a rival security magnate with ties to corporate espionage, private enforcement, and political favors, had found Victor months earlier and fed his obsession. Victor thought he was being helped to win Elena back. Kovalenko was using him to provoke Lucien, damage his reputation, and expose weaknesses in his organization. So I was bait before I knew there was a trap. Elena said later in Luciana's study. Rain moved down the windows in silver lines. Yes, Lucian said. She appreciated that he did not soften it. And you suspected Kovalenko before tonight. Yes, but you did not tell me. No, why? His face looked tired. That was rare. Because I thought information would frighten you. It does, I know. But being uninformed does not make me safe. It makes me easier to move around. He looked at her then, and she saw regret. Real regret. Not the kind people use to escape blame. You are right. 2 words. No defense. No speech. Elena almost did not know what to do with that. Victor had treated accountability like a battlefield. Lucian treated it like a door he could open when needed. Tell me everything now, she said. So he did. Kovalenko wanted Lucian's security contracts in the Northeast, government-adjacent protection details, high-net-worth family security, art transport, discreet asset recovery. Lucian's legitimate work had become too profitable, and his darker reputation made him difficult to compete against. Kovalenko could not outbuild him, so he looked for leverage. Elena had become that leverage the night she grabbed Lucian's arm. Or so Lucian said. That was the first version. The cleaner version. 2 nights later, Elena found the truth. It happened because of a painting. A stolen one. She was reviewing older acquisitions in Lucian's private database when she found a file locked behind 2 passwords. It should not have opened for her, but Marcus Chen's breach had forced system-wide resets, and someone had made a temporary access mistake. Elena clicked because the file title contained the name of an artist she had researched in college. Inside were reports, surveillance photos, Victor entering a gym, Victor outside Elena's old gallery, Victor speaking with a man later identified as Kovalenko's courier, then photos of Elena buying coffee, Elena entering her apartment, Elena walking with Mara, Elena outside St. Vale the night of the club, time stamped before she saw Victor. Her hands went cold. She scrolled further. A memo from Diane. Subject. Vale. Elena. Risk of contact event at St. Vale High. Armand to observe directly. Elena stopped breathing. Armand to observe directly. The words became a room with no exits. Lucian had not appeared because she needed him. He had been there because he knew Victor would come. He had watched. He had waited. He had let her run far enough to grab him. She left the penthouse without telling anyone. That was stupid. She knew it even while doing it. Trauma does that. It can make old exits look like freedom. She took the service elevator, went through the garage, and walked 6 blocks in the rain before calling Mara from her old phone. I need you, she said. Mara did not ask questions. Come here. Elena went. She did not see the gray sedan behind her. Neither did James, because James had been sent by Lucian to follow. After Diane noticed the unauthorized exit, and the sedan switched twice before anyone flagged it. For the first time since Elena entered Lucian's world, his system failed. At Mara's building, the front door camera had been disabled for exactly 4 minutes. That was all it took. Elena was halfway up the stairs when Mara opened her apartment door at the sound of footsteps. Elena. A man stepped from the landing behind Elena. Another came from below. Professional, not Victor's usual chaos. Elena tried to run upward, but one grabbed her coat. She twisted like Sarah taught her, broke the first grip, and screamed. Mara did not freeze. She slammed her door against the man nearest her and threw hot coffee into his face. For one bright second, Elena thought they would make it. Then Victor appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked thinner, harder, eyes fever bright. In his hand was a gun. Not pointed at Elena, pointed at Mara. Enough, he said. Everything stopped. Elena's body went cold. Victor, she said carefully. Put it down. He smiled. Now you want to talk. The men pushed them into Mara's apartment. One bound Mara's wrists with zip ties. The other checked the windows. Victor closed the door softly, like a guest being polite. That was the worst part. You should have listened. He told Elena. I told you he was using you. You used my friend to get to me. I used what you cared about. That is what he does too. Mara glared at him from the floor. You are a pathetic little man with a gun. Victor struck her. Not hard enough to knock her out, but hard enough to split her lip. Elena lunged. One of the men caught her. Victor looked almost sad. See, you still care more about other people than yourself. That was always your problem. He turned on Mara's television. A video appeared. Elena in Lucian's office. Elena entering his penthouse. Elena standing close to him in the study, cut together with security footage. Audio fragments, and a voiceover that sounded like Elena, but was not. Lucian Armand took me in when I was unstable. I signed papers I did not understand. He controls where I go. He controls who I see. Elena stared, horrified. That is fake. It will not matter, Victor said. People believe what looks clean enough. Mara spat blood onto her rug. You are insane. Victor's face twisted. I am finally thinking clearly. If he loses reputation, he loses power. If he loses power, he loses you. You think I will come back to you? Elena asked. He stepped close. I think when he is gone, you will remember who loved you first. That was the moment Elena understood Victor did not live in reality anymore. Maybe he never had. Love to him was not a bond. It was a claim he could keep trying to enforce, even after the person inside it had vanished. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Victor heard it. He smiled and took it out. Lucian's name glowed on the screen. Victor answered. She is busy. Elena could not hear Lucian, but she saw Victor's face change. Not fear this time. Excitement. No police, Victor said. No Diane, no private soldiers. You come alone. Or I post the video, and your precious Elena becomes another unstable woman no one believes. He listened. Then his smile widened. Warehouse on Kent. 1 hour. He hung up. Elena's heart hammered. He will not come alone. He will, Victor said. Because men like him think love makes them noble. Really, it makes them stupid. Victor was wrong about many things. He was not wrong about that. Lucian came alone. At least it looked that way at first. The warehouse by the river smelled of salt, rust and wet concrete. Victor's men drove Elena and Mara there before sunset, keeping their heads low but not blindfolding them. That was Victor's mistake. He wanted Elena to see Lucian arrive, wanted her to witness his fear. Lucian walked through the wide metal doors wearing no coat, no visible weapon, hands open at his sides. Rain darkened his hair. His face was expressionless. Elena had never been so angry to see him. Angry because he had lied. Angry because he had come. Angry because relief still tore through her when he entered. Let them go, Lucian said. Victor laughed. You do not give orders tonight. You wanted me. I am here. I wanted her to know what you are. She knows. Elena's voice cut through before Lucian could say more. I know you watched me before the club. Lucian's eyes went to her. The mask cracked. Not much. Enough. Victor looked delighted. There it is. That face. You did not tell her. Oh, Lucian. That is ugly. Even for you. Elena's voice shook. Did you use me? Lucian looked at Victor. Then back at her. No. Did you know Victor would be there? Yes. Did you let me walk into that room anyway? Silence. Yes. Something broke again. Deeper this time, because danger pressed around it. Why? Because we needed proof Kovalenko was feeding him information. Because if I warned you, you might change your pattern and he would vanish. Because I believed I could control the situation. You believed wrong, she said. Lucian took that like a blade. Yes, Victor clapped slowly. Beautiful. Truly, I almost hate to interrupt. Then he raised the gun toward Lucian. Mara screamed. Elena moved without thinking, slamming her shoulder into Victor's arm. The shot went wide, cracking into a metal beam. Chaos erupted. Lucian surged forward. One of Victor's men tackled him from the side. The second grabbed Elena. Mara, still bound, threw herself into the man's knees. Elena fell hard, rolled, and kicked upward. Sarah's training. Diane's voice, loud, heavy, inconvenient. Lucian fought like a man stripped of elegance. Fast, brutal, efficient, but not invincible. That was what terrified Elena. He was human. A blade caught him across the ribs. Blood spread dark across his shirt. He still dropped the man who cut him. But the wound slowed him. Victor saw it. His face lit with desperate triumph. He aimed again, this time at Elena. If I cannot have you, he said, then neither can he. Lucian moved between them. The second shot went off. Elena heard it, felt Mara scream beside her, saw Lucian stagger, not down, not dead, but hit. The warehouse doors exploded open before Victor could fire again. Diane's team came in with police behind them. Not Lucian's private army. Police, federal agents, real warrants, real evidence. Diane had not obeyed Victor's demand. Diane had obeyed the law and used every second Lucian bought. Victor froze. Elena used that second. She rose, grabbed a loose metal rod from the floor, and struck his wrist. The gun fell. Sarah reached him before he could recover. Victor hit the concrete alive and screaming. Elena ran to Lucian. You idiot, she said, pressing her hands to his bleeding side. He almost smiled. I have heard that assessment. Do not be charming while bleeding. I am not bleeding that much. You are bleeding on me. Then I apologize. Do not apologize. Stay awake. His eyes searched her face. Elena, you do not get to die before I decide whether I forgive you. That did make him smile, weak and real. Then I will try to survive the hearing. The ambulance took Lucian first because the bullet had grazed deep, and the knife wound was worse than he admitted. Mara rode with Elena in a second car, shaking, but alive. Her lip was split, her wrists bruised, her eyes furious. I hate him, Mara said. Elena did not ask which man. At the hospital. Diane found Elena in the hallway outside surgery. He will live, Diane said. Elena leaned against the wall and covered her face. The relief was so strong, it felt like nausea. Diane stood beside her. He was wrong not to tell you. Elena dropped her hands. You knew too. Yes. Did everyone know except me? Not everyone. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. Diane's face was pale with fatigue. He believed he was containing the risk. So did I. We were wrong. You used me. Diane did not flinch. We allowed you to move through a situation we understood better than you did. That is true. I can justify the strategy. I cannot justify the lack of consent. Elena looked through the surgery doors. Consent. That is the word. Yes. You all talk about protecting people. We failed the most important part. Diana's voice softened. Protection without consent becomes control. I am sorry. Elena wanted to hate her. She could not. Accountability made hatred harder. Lucian woke 14 hours later. Elena was in the chair beside his bed, not because she had forgiven him, but because leaving before he woke felt like letting fear make the choice. He opened his eyes, found her, and tried to sit up. Pain stopped him. Do not, she said. Doctor's orders. Mara, alive. Angry, she saw you emotionally. His mouth moved. Almost a smile. Then it faded. Elena, no speeches. I owe you the truth. You owed it before. Yes. She waited. He looked at the ceiling, then back at her. I had been investigating Victor, because Kovalenko C's name appeared in a separate case. A shelter director we fund received threats after refusing to disclose resident information. One of the threats traced to the same courier, who later met Victor. Your restraining order file appeared in a data scrape. Diane flagged you as a possible target. At first you were a case. Then I saw the footage of Victor outside your gallery. I should have warned you. Why didn't you? His jaw tightened. Because I believed if we watched, we could catch the network behind him. If we intervened too early, Victor might run back to Kovalenko and disappear. I told myself surveillance was protection. But I was not a painting in your collection to be watched until someone tried to steal it. He closed his eyes. No, you made me part of a plan I had not agreed to. Yes, and then you offered me choice after taking the first one away. His face changed as if the words hurt more than the wound. Yes, Elena stood. I need time. Mechanic flashed in his eyes before he controlled it. Take it. Do not follow me. I will not. Do not have someone follow me. That cost him. She saw the instinct to refuse, the fear, the calculation. Then he said, I will ask Diane to offer security. You can decline. Good. She walked to the door. Elena, she stopped but did not turn. I love you, he said. It was the first time. Bad timing. Terrible timing. Honest timing. She closed her eyes. I know. Then she left. She stayed with Mara for 10 days. Not because it was safer, because it was hers to choose. Diane offered security. Elena accepted only visible patrol support and a panic device. No hidden watchers. No black car idling half a block away. She went to therapy twice that week. She cried in Mara's kitchen. She slept badly. She missed Lucian so much it made her angry. Healing is not clean. Sometimes the person who helped you heal also hurts you. Sometimes the boundary you set feels like cutting your own skin. But Elena kept it. Lucian did not call. He sent one message through Diane. I will answer any question, whenever you are ready. No pressure, no request, no apology disguised as a plea. On the 11th day, Elena went to see him. He was back at the penthouse, moving carefully. Ribs wrapped, face thinner from blood loss and frustration. He opened the door himself. You should not be walking around, she said. Margaret says the same thing with more judgment. The almost normal sentence hurt. They sat across from each other, in the living room, where so many things had begun. Elena spoke first. If I come back into your life, it is not because I forgot what you did. I would not ask you to. You do not get to protect me without telling me what protection costs. No, you do not get to decide that my fear makes consent inconvenient. No, you do not get to love me by managing me. His eyes held hers. No, and if you ever do it again, I leave, I know. No, you accept it. Lucian's voice was rough. I accept it, she nodded. Then here is my truth. I love you too. I wish I did not right now. It would make this simpler. His face changed with quiet pain. I am sorry. I know, and I believe you. But sorry does not rebuild trust. Behavior does. Tell me what behavior. Full disclosure on any threat involving me or Mara. Diane reports to me directly, not through you. I keep my own apartment or office space outside your penthouse if I want it. I continue therapy. You could continue whatever version of therapy a man like you will actually attend. He blinked. Therapy. Yes. I have interrogated war criminals. Then you can survive, a licensed professional, asking about your father. For the first time in weeks, he laughed. It sounded like pain and relief together. Except, and one more thing, anything. We take down Kovalenko legally if possible. I am not building my life on bodies unless there is no other way. Lucian looked at her for a long time. Legally if possible, he said, and if not. Elena looked at the marble where his blood had fallen. Then we remember that the goal is safety, not revenge. That became the new line between them. Not clean, not easy, but chosen. Victor was held on assault, stalking, weapons, and kidnapping-related charges. Kovalenko's lawyers tried to distance their client from him. The fake video leaked anyway. For 48 hours. Elena's face moved through corners of the internet under headlines that made her stomach twist. Security mogul accused of controlling employee. Former partner claims woman under influence of dangerous billionaire. Comments did what comments do. They judged without knowing. They called her unstable, gold digger, victim, liar. Pretty enough to manipulate men. Too calm to be abused. Too emotional to be credible. Elena almost broke under it, not because strangers mattered, but because Victor's old lie had found a larger room. Then Mara posted her own video. No makeup. Split lip still visible. Voice shaking with rage. My name is Mara Ellis. Victor Hale held me at gunpoint to force my best friend into silence. The video you are sharing is fake. But even if it were not, ask yourself why you are more ready to believe a violent man than a woman asking to be left alone. The video went viral, not in the glamorous way people imagine. In the ugly, necessary way. Truth sometimes travels, because enough people are tired of the same old lie. Survivors commented. Advocates shared resources. Lawyers explained documentation. Therapists explained coercive control. The story turned. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. But enough. Elena learned something then. Being believed by everyone is impossible. Being believed by the right people can save your life. Kovalenko made his next mistake because he thought public shame had weakened her. He did not understand that shame loses power when dragged into the open and named correctly. The final plan began not as revenge, but as evidence. That mattered to Elena. It mattered to Mara. It mattered even to Lucian, though she knew a darker part of him would always prefer certainty over procedure. Diane built the case like a cathedral. Marcus Chen's testimony, financial transfers, the courier's messages, the fake video metadata, shelter threats connected to Kovalenko's shell companies, evidence of data theft, evidence of witness intimidation, evidence that Kovalenko's organization had used abusive partners, debtors, and desperate men as tools to reach protected women, clients and political targets. It was uglier than Elena had imagined. Victor was not an exception. He was a method. He looks for men who already feel entitled to someone. Diane explained during a strategy meeting. Then he gives them money, information, and a story where their obsession becomes justified. Elena sat beside Lucian, not behind him. His ribs had healed enough for him to move without flinching. But sometimes she saw pain cross his face when he turned too quickly. She did not rush to help unless he asked. That was part of their new language. So Kovalenko weaponizes domestic abuse, Elena said. Yes, Diane replied, because it gives him deniability. If the man attacks, it looks personal. If he fails, Kovalenko loses nothing. Mara, who had insisted on attending any meeting where her name appeared in a threat file, muttered, I hate rich men with spreadsheets. Lucian looked at her, a reasonable position. Mara narrowed her eyes. Do not make me like you. Elena almost smiled. The plan centered on the Calder Foundation Gala, an event Kovalenko could not ignore. Donors, prosecutors, city officials, security executives, art collectors, and reporters would all be present. Lucian was scheduled to speak about funding survivor services through anonymous trusts. This time, the irony did not feel hollow to Elena. She had seen the accounts. Emergency housing, legal aid, therapy access, relocation funds, employer training, real infrastructure, not charity for applause. The educational value became personal. People escaping abuse needed more than courage. Courage without money could get you sleeping in your car. Courage without documentation could get you dismissed. Courage without community could send you back to the person who hurt you, because at least danger was familiar there. Elena helped edit Lucien's speech. She added one line. Believe people when they say they are afraid, even if the person they fear smiles well in public. Lucien read it twice and kept it. In the days before the gala, Lucien did something Elena had not expected. He went to therapy. He did not talk about it much. The first time he returned, he looked like someone had taken a weapon from him and given him a mirror. Elena was sitting at the dining table, reviewing a provenance report when he came in. How was it? She asked. He removed his coat slowly. Deeply inefficient. She lowered the file. That bad. She asked me what I felt when I realized my mother had left, and I told her I felt motivated. Elena waited. Lucien sighed. Apparently, that was not a feeling. She tried not to smile. Failed. What did you feel? He stood by the window for a while. The city reflected his face back at him. Abandoned, he said at last. Quietly, like the word had teeth. Elena went to him but stopped an arm's length away. May I? He nodded. She touched his hand. He held on like a man learning that being held was not the same as being weakened. It was a small scene. No blood, no threats, no grand confession. But Elena remembered it, because tenderness often arrives without music. Another evening, Lucien sat outside Elena's therapist's office without asking what she discussed inside. He had brought a book, and did not turn a page for 40 minutes. When Elena came out, eyes red, he stood. Tea, he asked. Not what happened. Not who upset you. Just tea. Yes, she said, and maybe pancakes. For dinner. Healing is unpredictable. Apparently, they ate pancakes at a diner where no one knew his name. Lucien looked too expensive for the cracked red booth, and still managed to listen while Elena spoke about shame, anger, and the strange grief of realizing Victor had never loved her in the way she once believed. I grieve someone who did not exist, she said. Is that foolish? Lucien poured syrup with unnecessary precision. No, it is human. You are mourning the future you were promised, not the man who broke it. She looked at him. That sounds like therapy worked on you by accident. Do not tell her. Elena laughed. The final briefing took place the afternoon of the gala. Diane stood at the head of the conference table. Kovalenko may try persuasion first. He will tell partial truths. Partial truths are more dangerous than lies, because they make your body recognize something familiar. Elena nodded. He will say Lucien used me. Lucien's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Elena appreciated that. He will say, I am not free. Yes, Diane said. He will try to make you doubt your own decisions. Mara crossed her arms. And if Victor gets out somehow, he will not. Diane said. He is in custody under watch. But Elena had learned not to build safety out of perfect assumptions. Still, she said, we plan for it. Diane nodded once. Good. There was another risk. A larger one. Diane had confirmed that Kovalenko was preparing a public strike against Lucien's company. A forged report claiming Armand's security had illegally detained clients, manipulated vulnerable women, and used charity foundations to launder influence. The report mixed lies with enough fragments of real gray area work to be dangerous. If released during the gala, clients would flee, contracts would freeze, federal partners would back away. Lucien might not go to prison, but his empire could bleed out in weeks. He is not only attacking Elena, Diane said. He is attacking legitimacy. Lucien looked at the documents without expression. Can we stop publication? Maybe, Diane said. But if we suppress it too aggressively, we look guilty. Elena studied the forged report. Something about the artwork on the cover caught her eye. A photograph of a painting from Lucien's collection, used as a symbolic image of corruption. Where did he get this image? She asked. Lucien glanced at it. Catalog archive. No, this version has the old frame. It was changed before the archive went public. Diane leaned forward. Meaning this image came from a private appraisal file, not from Marcus Chen. He never had access to the art division. Lucien's face went still. Diane's eyes sharpened. Another leak. Or an older one, Elena said. She enlarged the image. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a reflection. A man standing behind the photographer. Tall, silver hair. Not Kovalenko. Older, Elena did not know him. But Lucien did. His color changed so subtly most would have missed it. Elena did not. Lucien, he stared at the screen. That is impossible. Diane looked too. For the first time since Elena had known her, Diane looked genuinely unsettled. Where did this come from? Elena asked. Lucien's voice was low. My father. Silence fell across the room. Mara looked between them. Your dead father. Lucien did not answer. That was answer enough. The old ghost had entered the story before the final battle. Not at the end. Not as a random knock from the past. Here, in the evidence. In the machinery of Kovalenko's attack. Elena remembered the way Lucian avoided certain questions. The way Diane once stopped speaking when his father was mentioned. The locked file she had seen weeks ago labeled A. Armand Sr. Deceased status unverified. She had noticed it. But so much had happened that it slipped into the background. It came back now with teeth. I thought he died, Elena said. Lucian's eyes did not leave the screen. So did I, Diane's voice was careful. We never confirmed the body. Mara threw up both hands. Of course you did not confirm the body. Rich, dangerous families never confirm the body. No one laughed. Lucien stood and walked to the window. For a moment, he looked less like a king than a boy staring at a door he thought had been locked forever. Elena followed, but did not touch him yet. If he is alive, she said softly. What does that mean? Lucien's face hardened. It means Kovalenko may not be the architect. He may be the weapon. Diane closed the file slowly. We continue with the gala. We need Kovalenko in custody before we can follow this thread. If Armand Sr. is involved, he wants destabilization. We do not give it to him. Lucien turned back. The boy was gone. The dangerous man remained. But Elena had seen both now. She would remember. The night of the gala. Margaret helped Elena into a midnight blue dress, with a neckline high enough to hold the tracking necklace, and a cut practical enough for movement. Sarah taped a slim emergency blade inside Elena's clutch. This is not confidence jewelry, Sarah said. This is last resort equipment. Understood. No heroic nonsense. You sound like Lucien. He is occasionally correct. Lucien waited in the living room in a black tuxedo, one hand still moving carefully near his healing side. When he saw Elena, his expression went still. What? She asked. I am trying to find a word that is not inadequate. Do not start sounding like a poet. It will scare Diane. He smiled. Then the smile faded. You can still choose not to do this. So can you. I will not insult you by asking again. Thank you. I will ask something else. She looked at him. If fear tells you to stop, stop. You do not owe the plan your body. Elena walked to him and adjusted his bow tie even though it did not need adjusting. That is the difference. You know what? Victor always told me what I owed him. You keep reminding me what I do not owe anyone. Lucien brought her hand to his mouth and kissed her knuckles. Hold on to that. In the car, Mara texted Elena 6 knife emojis and the words, I am sitting with Diane. This counts as personal growth. Elena laughed softly. Lucien looked over. Mara, she is threatening people supportively. Consistent. The gala glittered the way expensive rooms always glitter. Champagne, gold light, diamonds, men laughing too loudly, women smiling at jokes they had heard before, art on white walls, admired by people who looked at price before brushwork. Elena entered on Lucien's arm and felt the room notice, not because she was beautiful, though she was. Because she did not look rescued, she looked present. That was new. Reporters glanced toward her and whispered. Lucien's hand rested near her back but did not steer. Diane watched from across the room. Mara stood near the foundation table, wearing a black suit and the expression of a woman daring the universe to try her. Kovalenko arrived an hour later, slim, pale-eyed, silver hair cut close, smile designed for donors and depositions. He approached with 2 men behind him. Lucien, he said, I was beginning to think philanthropy had softened you. Marcus, Lucien replied. I was beginning to think federal prison would find you first. Kovalenko laughed, still dramatic. His gaze shifted to Elena. Miss Vale, how brave of you to appear after such a difficult week. Elena smiled politely. I have had practice appearing after difficult weeks. Yes, I suppose you have. The conversation moved like silk over knives. Kovalenko asked about art. Elena answered. He made a wrong assumption about a sculpture. She corrected him. His eyes sharpened. He had expected a frightened lover. He found a professional. That was the first small victory. Lucien's speech came halfway through the evening. Elena stood near the side of the stage as he spoke about power, responsibility, and the difference between charity and infrastructure. His voice did not shake when he said, leaving violence is not one brave moment. It is a dangerous process. It requires money, witnesses, legal help, safe housing, trauma care, and employers who understand that a survivor's fear is not weakness. It is information. Our duty is not to judge why someone stayed. Our duty is to build more doors through which they can leave. Elena felt tears rise, but she did not let them fall yet. Across the room, Mara did cry, quietly, angrily. The applause began. Then the screens behind Lucien changed. The foundation logo vanished. A video started. Elena's face appeared. Lucian's office, the penthouse, the warehouse, his blood on her hands. Cut together with false audio and selective fragments, a woman's artificial voice said, Lucien Armand controls women and calls it protection. He builds shelters with one hand, and prisons with the other. The room erupted. Reporters stood. Donners turned. Lucien froze for half a heartbeat, not because he was afraid for himself, because Elena was on the screens, because her face had once again become someone else's weapon. Diane moved toward the control room. Mara shouted something that would have been funny in another life. Kovalenko smiled. This was the larger strike, public, cruel, designed to make Lucien react, designed to make Elena look broken. Lucien turned toward her, and Elena saw the question in his eyes. Not should I save you, not anymore. What do you choose? Elena walked onto the stage. Security moved to stop her. Lucien raised one hand. They stopped. She took the microphone from the podium. Her heart was beating so hard, she could hear it in the speakers. For a second, she saw every face in the room. Doubt, curiosity, hunger, pity, judgment. Then she breathed. Signal, not command. My name is Elena Vale, she said. The room quieted slowly. The video still played behind her, until Diane killed the feed. Elena continued. That video is false, but it uses something real. It uses the fact that I was in danger. It uses the fact that I needed help. It uses the fact that powerful men often stand too close to vulnerable women and call it protection. That is why it works. Because some women have lived that. I have lived that. Lucien stood below the stage, face pale. Elena did not look away from the room. But here is what the video leaves out. I have said no to Lucien Armand. He listened. I left his home. He did not follow. I set terms. He accepted them. I asked for direct access to security information. I got it. I asked for therapy to be part of rebuilding trust. He went. That is not a perfect story. It is a human one. And if you are only willing to believe survivors when their stories are clean, simple, and easy for you to categorize, then you are not believing survivors. You are believing comfort, silence, real silence. Tonight, someone tried to turn my fear into a product again. That is what abuse does. That is what exploitation does. It takes a person's pain and uses it to control the room. I am done being used that way. She looked at Kovalenko then. So did everyone else. His smile vanished. Diane's team moved. Federal agents entered from two sides. The public strike had become public evidence. Kovalenko had triggered the malicious release from inside the venue network. Diane had traced it in real time. The agents had what they needed. Kovalenko stepped backward. His men moved too. Then he made his final mistake. He did not run for the door. He went for Mara. She stood near the foundation table, closest to the side hallway. One of his men grabbed her with a small blade near her side. Mara's face went pale but furious. I told you. She snapped at him. Kidnapping me twice is lazy writing. Fear punched through Elena so hard she almost moved toward her. Almost, then she saw Mara's hand. 2 fingers pressed against her bracelet. Signal. Mara had learned too. Diane's eyes shifted. Sarah disappeared. Kovalenko leaned toward Elena from the base of the stage. You wanted choice. Here is one. Walk with me, or your friend bleeds on live video. Elena looked across the room at Lucien. His face had become something terrible. He was one breath away from violence. Elena shook her head once. Stay. Trust me. Lucien stopped. It cost him. She saw it. Everyone who knew him saw it. But he stopped. Elena stepped down from the stage slowly. You are very good at using people who love someone, she said to Kovalenko. Love is leverage, he said. No, Elena said. Love is why you keep losing. Mara moved first. She dropped her weight, slamming her heel into the Manson step. Sarah came from the side and struck his wrist. The blade fell. Diane's team closed in. Kovalenko grabbed Elena, pulling her toward the service door. She did not freeze. She stepped with him for half a second, enough to unbalance his expectation, then drove her elbow back into his ribs. He cursed. She twisted free. Lucien reached them then, but instead of striking Kovalenko, he did the hardest thing for him. He let the federal agents take the lead. Marcus Kovalenko, the lead agent, said, You are under arrest on federal charges related to racketeering, corporate espionage, witness intimidation, data theft, conspiracy, malicious digital manipulation, and material support of stalking and coercive intimidation. Kovalenko's face went white with rage. You staged this. Diane stepped forward with the tablet. You helped. Repeatedly. Kovalenko looked at Elena. Hatred stripped the charm from his face. You think this makes you safe? Elena looked at Mara, who was alive and already yelling at a paramedic that she did not need fussing. She looked at Lucien, who stood still. shaking with restrained violence and choosing restraint anyway. She looked at Diane, Sarah, the agents, the witnesses, the cameras. No, Elena said. It makes me believed. That was the line that mattered. Not safe. Safety would still require work. Locks, boundaries, legal follow-through, therapy, time. But being believed changed the shape of fear. It took the loneliness out of it. Kovalenko was taken away. His men were taken away. Mara hugged Elena so hard they both nearly fell. I hate your life, Mara whispered. I know. I am proud of you. Elena closed her eyes. I know that too. Later, at the penthouse. Lucian poured water instead of whiskey. He handed her a glass and kept his distance until she reached for him. You trusted me, she said, barely. But you did, yes. Was it terrible? Worse than being shot? Elena gave a shaky laugh. That is dramatic. It is accurate. She moved into his arms. He held her carefully, as if still learning the shape of respect after fear. You could have hit him, she said. I wanted to kill him. I know I did not. I know. His arms tightened. You called me back. No, Elena said, pulling away enough to look at him. You came back. I only reminded you there was a choice. He looked at her for a long time. I love you. This time the words did not arrive in a hospital room or under the shadow of a lie. They arrived in truth. Elena touched his face. I love you too. Not because you saved me. Not because you scare other men. I love you. Because you are trying to become someone who knows power is not the same as control. His expression softened. And you. I am trying to become someone who knows safety is not the same as hiding. They kissed. Slowly. No urgency. No fear mistaken for passion. Just two people choosing each other, after seeing the worst of what choice could cost. In the weeks that followed, Kovalenko's arrest cracked open more than one case. Other women came forward, former employees, former clients. One shelter director who had been threatened for refusing to reveal the location of a resident. A driver who had been paid to follow a woman whose husband wanted her back. An analyst who had altered reports. It was not one villain. It was a network of people who had treated fear as a market. Lucian's foundation expanded. Elena insisted the new survivor fund include practical education, how to document stalking, how to build a safety plan, how to leave without alerting an abuser too early, how friends could help without taking control. Mara helped write a section titled, How Not to Say Something Useless. When Your Friend is in Danger. Diane hated the title. Survivors loved it. Victor, meanwhile, did not become a tragic ghost or a final body in Lucian's past. He became something harder for Elena to face, a living consequence. He took a plea after the evidence became impossible to spin. Assault, stalking, weapons, kidnapping-related charges, cyber harassment connected to the fake video. He would spend years in prison. At sentencing, Elena spoke. She wore a gray suit and no jewelry except her mother's earrings. Mara sat behind her. Lucian sat beside Mara, not touching Elena, not towering, just present. Elena read from a page because she wanted every word to belong to her. Victor Hale did not love me too much. He respected me too little. He called control concern. He called obsession devotion. He called my fear proof that I was unstable. I want the court to understand something. Many people misunderstand. Leaving was not one decision. It was 1,000. Every morning I did not go back. Every phone call I did not answer. Every door I locked. Every friend I trusted. I am alive because people believed me. Because I documented. Because I had help. And because I learned that no is a complete sentence, even when a dangerous man refuses to hear it. Victor stared at the table. He did not look sorry. Not really. But Elena no longer needed his remorse to be free. That was another kind of healing. After court, reporters shouted questions. Elena did not answer. Mara did. Read the statement. She snapped. It was clear. Lucian almost smiled. Elena took his hand in the car. Do you think he understood, Victor? Yes. No, Lucian said. But the judge did. The record did. Sometimes that is enough. Elena leaned back. Enough. She was learning to respect that word. It was not perfect. It was not complete. But enough could be a bridge. Enough could get you to morning. That night, Lucian changed the bandage over his ribs, while Elena stood at the bathroom sink removing her earrings. He was clumsy with the tape because the angle was awkward, so she turned and held out her hand. May I? He looked at her through the mirror. Yes, she changed the bandage slowly. The wound was healing, red at the edges, ugly, but closing. Does it hurt? She asked. Less than thesthery. You are dramatic. Repeatedly accused. She smiled and pressed the tape down gently. Lucian, yes. Thank you for not killing him. His eyes met hers in the mirror. Thank you for making me a man who could choose not to. No, she said softly. You chose. Do not give me credit for your restraint. That belongs to you. He looked at her for a long time. I am still learning. So am I later. Sat on the kitchen floor because Elena wanted tea, and somehow they both ended up there. Backs against the cabinets, legs stretched out. The penthouse quiet around them. It was not glamorous. It was better. When I was small, Lucian said, staring into his cup, I used to think if I became powerful enough, nothing would ever hurt anyone I loved again. And now, I think power can reduce danger. It cannot erase being human. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. That is a terrible discovery. Deeply inconvenient. She laughed softly. He kissed her hair. For the first time, the silence between them did not feel like something waiting to break. It felt like rest. 6 months after St. Vale, Elena returned to her old apartment to give back the keys. She went in daylight. Not because she feared the dark, but because daylight felt right for endings. Lucian came with her, though he stayed by the door after unlocking it, giving her the rooms without turning them into another stage for his protection. Mara came too, carrying coffee and a box of pastries because she believed closure required carbohydrates. The apartment looked smaller than Elena remembered. Sadder, pale walls, empty shelves, a narrow kitchen where she had once eaten, standing up, because sitting down felt too settled, a front door with 3 locks, none of which had ever made her feel safe. Elena walked through slowly, her footsteps echoed. Months ago, this place had been a waiting room for disaster. Every object had been chosen for quick abandonment, every routine built around escape. She opened the bedroom closet and saw the corner where she used to keep her emergency bag, cash, passport, charger, copies of documents, pepper spray, a sweater. She had been proud of that bag once. Now she felt sorrow for the woman who needed it. Not shame, sorrow, healing. She had learned, meant looking at your past self with tenderness, instead of embarrassment. Mara leaned in the doorway. I hated this place. Elena looked at her. You never said. You needed one place that did not openly hate you. Elena crossed the room and hugged her. Thank you for being that place instead. Mara held on tight. Are you really okay? Elena took time with the answer. I am not who I was. But yes, I think I am okay. Mara looked toward Lucian, who stood near the front room pretending not to listen. And obviously listening. And him, Elena smiled faintly. He is not my cure. That is important. He helped. He protected. He hurt me too. Then he changed his behavior. I am healing because I have support, work therapy, choices, and people who tell me the truth when I need it. Mara's eyes shone. That is the best answer you have ever given. I practiced in therapy, worth every dollar. Lucian looked down, smiling to himself. After Mara left them alone for a few minutes, Elena placed the old apartment key on the kitchen counter. Lucian watched from the doorway. You gave yourself back your life, he said. Do not give me credit for all of it. I know, do you? She turned. Yes, you gave me tools. I used them. His eyes warmed. Exactly. She looked around one last time. I do not need a life built around exits anymore. No. I want doors I open because I am going somewhere. Not because I am running. Lucian reached into his coat and took out a folder. Then I have something to ask you. Elena raised an eyebrow. You are proposing something in my empty fear apartment. Symbolism seemed efficient. You are impossible. Often she opened the folder. Not a ring. Not a deed. A proposal. A London office. Cultural Assets Division. European Client Relations. Ethical Provenance Review. Survivor-funded art auctions. Partnerships with museums, shelters, and legal aid organizations. Her name was listed not as assistant, not as curator under Lucian, but as director. Elena Vale, partner, Cultural Assets and Restitution Strategy. She looked up slowly. Restitution. Lucian nodded. You made a point months ago. Owning something is not the same as deserving it. If we build this division, I want it to do more than acquire beautiful things for rich people. I want return pathways for stolen pieces, review boards, auction programs that fund survivor services, real infrastructure. Her throat tightened. You hate giving speeches about values, but then you do this. I prefer values with infrastructure. That is the most Lucian sentence you have ever said. He stepped closer. I am asking if you want to build it with me, not as someone I rescued, not as someone I employ out of convenience, as my partner, in business, in life, in whatever comes next. London, New York, wherever the work takes us. Elena looked around the apartment again. The old walls, the old fear, the old girl who had slept with shoes beside the bed. Then she looked at Lucian, the dangerous man who had lied and then learned to tell the truth, the powerful man who had chosen restraint when violence would have been easier, the man who still had darkness in him, but no longer used it as an excuse to decide for her. Yes, she said, but I have terms. His mouth curved. Of course you do. Therapy continues. For both of us. Accepted. Mara gets guest privileges and the right to insult your furniture. Reluctantly accepted. Diane reports to both of us on threats involving me. She already does. She likes you better. Smart woman. Anything else? Elena held the folder to her chest. We build something that helps people leave before they have to run. Emergency housing. Legal funds. Employer education. Documentation resources. Art auctions that fund actual survivor services. Not charity for applause. Real help. Lucien's face softened into something almost reverent. Accepted. And if I ever become a symbol to you instead of a person, you tell me, and if you do not listen, you leave. And I make sure no one follows. Elena smiled. Good answer. They locked the apartment for the last time and rode the elevator down. Outside, the late afternoon sun turned the city gold. James waited by the car. Mara had left the pastries on the back seat with a note. Eat something. Both of you look dramatic. Elena laughed until she cried a little. Lucien read the note and said, She concerns me. She should. That evening, they attended a smaller gala for one of Lucien's foundations. Not the kind where danger hid behind champagne. A warmer room. Advocates, donors, lawyers, shelter workers, survivors who spoke if they chose, and stayed anonymous if they did not. Lucien gave the speech Elena had helped shape. He stood at the podium, calm and elegant, and said, A person escaping violence does not need judgment disguised as advice. They need options. They need time. They need money. They need witnesses who do not look away. They need systems that understand leaving can be the most dangerous part. And above all, they need to be treated not as damaged people, but as human beings whose dignity was violated and must be restored. Elena stood at the side of the room and listened. 6 months earlier, she had grabbed his arm because she needed a lie. There you are. I have been looking everywhere for you. Now she stood there by choice, watching him use power in a room full of people who needed more than pretty words. After the speech, an older woman approached Elena near the hallway. Her hair was gray, her hands nervous. You are with Mr. Armand, she said. Elena smiled gently. Yes, he helped my daughter. Through the housing fund. He will never know her name, but he helped. Elena felt the words settle deep. I am glad. The woman looked down. People think leaving is one brave moment. It is not. It is 1,000 small terrors. Elena nodded. I know. The woman looked at her then. Really looked. Recognition passed between them without details. Then you also know, the woman said, that surviving is not the end. Elena looked across the room at Lucien, who was speaking with Diane and Mara, somehow enduring both of them at once. Yes, she said. It is the beginning of deciding what kind of life fear does not get to steal. Later, instead of going home, Lucien asked James to drive through the city. Elena sat beside him, the London proposal on her lap, her hand in his. The skyline rose around them, beautiful and indifferent. There would be more threats. Men like Kovalenko did not vanish from the world because one went to prison. Men like Victor still smiled well in public. Systems still failed. People still looked away. But Elena no longer believed safety meant never facing danger. Safety meant choices, skills, community, boundaries, money if possible, documentation, people who believed you, people who listened when you said no, people who did not turn gratitude into debt. Upstairs, Margaret had left champagne chilling and tea beside it, because she understood both celebration and nerves. Lucien poured champagne. Elena poured tea. They stood by the window, where so many conversations had changed them. To new beginnings, Lucien said. Elena touched her glass to his. To never running again. Never. Not from fear. Strategic exits still count as wisdom. Diane would be proud. Diane is always proud quietly. Lucien laughed. A real laugh. Elena loved that sound because it still surprised him. They talked late into the night about London. Shelters. Stolen art. Mara's suspicion. Diane's impossible standards. And the future, as if it were something they could build with their hands. When Elena finally fell asleep, it was not with the numb peace of a danger removed by force. It was deeper, hard-earned, complicated, awake to the world's darkness and still willing to meet morning. She had not been saved into silence. She had not been loved into obedience. She had been believed, challenged, respected, and given room to become someone she recognized. The woman who once ran through a nightclub, looking for anyone strong enough to stand between her and Victor was gone, not erased, not forgotten. honored. She had done what she needed to survive. But the woman sleeping now in Lucien Armand's arms was not a victim hiding in a powerful man's shadow. She was Elena Val, curator, survivor, partner, friend. A woman with a voice that no longer broke when she said no. A woman with hands that could create, defend, comfort, and choose. Outside, the city moved through the dark, full of danger, beauty, cruelty, mercy, and all the gray spaces where real life happens. Elena knew the world would never be simple. Lucien would never be simple. Love would never be simple. But simple was not the same as good. Easy was not the same as free. And safety, real safety, was not a locked door or a dangerous man or a perfect system. It was the power to stand in your own life and know you had the right to be there. Morning came softly. Gold light spilled across the marble, where Lucien's blood had once fallen. Elena woke before him and walked to the window. The city below looked nothing like a place to hide. It looked like a place to begin. Then her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. For one moment, her body remembered the old fear. Then she breathed. Signal, not command. She picked it up. A photo loaded. Old, grainy. A woman standing beside a black car in Vancouver. Lucien's mother. Elena recognized her from a private photograph. Lucien kept hidden inside a book on his desk. On the back of the image, someone had written a single line. Tell my son his father is still alive. Elena looked toward the bedroom, where Lucien slept in the first peace she had ever seen on his face. The past had found them after all. But this time, Elena did not run. She stood in the morning light, phone in hand, and understood the next war would not find a frightened woman waiting to be rescued. It would find her ready,